there's been a story lately that I want to cover, and I'm sure this is a topic that everyone's going to have a different opinion on, and I wanted to weigh in mine, even though it's something I don't usually cover on this channel, but it's in regards to the voice actor, let me make sure I've got this correct, Pierre, Taki, who voiced Yakuza's Hamura in Judgement, as well as Olaf in both the Frozen and the recent Kingdom Hearts 3 game. Now, Pierre Taki, he's recently just been arrested for illegal drug use. He's actually been caught with a small, I've got to specify this, a small amount of cocaine. When he was arrested last night, they searched his car, they found a small amount, he did a urine test, turned up positive, and Taki admitted to violating the country's drug laws by using said small amount of cocaine. Investigators are examining his mobile phone to discern about more illegal drug use. And it's gone even further. So not only have Square Enix pulled the voice actor, Olaf, from the game, and they're going to be doing this via, I think, a patch. So they're going to be patching in a whole new voice actor to disassociate from Taki. And in my opinion, vilify his small amount of drug use. Tweaking his own consciousness. But of course, this is Japan, and they are brutal when it comes to this kind of thing. Now, I want to say, you know, a country's laws and rules are country's laws and rules, and they should be upheld and respected. But to what degree? And this is what I want to go into with this video. So even Sega have now jumped aboard this vilifying trend with this guy. And they are actually going to be pulling Judgement sales of retail and digital versions, or delaying them at least. And they have apologized for any trouble that this causes, adding that it was considering what steps to take next. Straight off the bat, I'm going to say, and it might be unpopular, so I feel really bad for Taki, and I just want to say, Square Enix, get off your damn high horse. But I also want to bring up the topic of, where does this end? How far do you go with something like this? Because it doesn't take a genius to know that when it comes to creativity and just creative minds, creative individuals, that tweaking consciousness, psychoactives, nootropics, mind enhancers, neurological connectors, whatever you want to call them, they are prevalent amongst creatives, and it really doesn't take much to even look at Kingdom Hearts worlds, the certain Disney worlds it's using, and you've got to seriously consider whether they have a history of drug references, drug use. So just some of them I want to pull up, especially when it comes to Disney, because Walt Disney and even the Brothers Grimm, who a lot of the influence and inspiration for a lot of these come from, all of them have very strongly rumored. I mean, there is definitely at least a very strong hint that even a lot of the other Kingdom Hearts worlds that are being used, the Disney worlds that are being used, have a history and a backstory in drug use, or being influenced by drugs, and the perceptions and the creative teams have very often been rumored to be on psychoactive drugs, and you can just see it in a lot of the product. After all, your foundation doesn't come from a legendary film called Fantasia, where it's got dancing bloody brooms and all the other wackiness in that. Even the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs are kind of very strongly reported or guessed at or theorized, I guess, to be the 7 stages of cocaine addiction. So sleepy, grumpy, snoozy, snory, horny, whatever the hell their names are. And what about these? I mean, you've got Pan. A lot of people said this was very racist to Native Americans. But you've got Pan smashing on the old peace pipe. Even in Pinocchio, again, another word used, Pinocchio is just smashing it.
Come on, take a big drag, like this.
Okay, Lappy.
No, I don't know what you're going to say. It's tobacco. No, that's a cigar. Could be the same with the Peter Pan one. But no one, after greening out on a cigar, ends up getting all happy and dopey and smiley like Pinocchio does. Even Mickey Mouse got rolled up into a joint once and smoked. Now, with those specific ones, most of those coming from Walt Disney and his creative team, even Walt Disney himself. Again, it was massively just rumoured and there's nothing confirmed, but even he was reported to be on mescaline a hell of a lot, especially around the time he was having his nervous breakdowns. I think he had like 2 or 3 of those. But in terms of the mescaline, just in case I get called out, this is just from an American visionary artist, Mr. Lafferty. He claimed and also worked with Walt Disney and said that he had indeed indulged in the use of the hallucinogenic drug mescaline in an attempt to explain the artistic implications of the new field of animation. And this is the funny thing about Square Enix vilifying this dude for cocaine. What about any other kind of drugs? How far do you go with this, Square Enix? And really, was Square Enix's response to get rid of the voice actor, and what I definitely think has shined the light on the scenario even more? Like, no one would have really cared. No one would have looked at the voice actor Olaf being used and gone, Square, did you not know he used drugs after he did the voice acting? How dare you don't remove him? No one would have given a damn. And this video isn't at all to come in support of drugs or the use of it. It's just highlighting that what other drugs would you have had this same response on? How far do you go with vilifying creatives for tweaking their own consciousness, for taking psychoactives or to give themselves a new creative perspective, lens, things that have, again, I mean, even if we go, there's no way this scene here, look at it, there was absolutely no way that hasn't come from the perspective of somebody who has experienced visuals, who has either said about it, used as an influence, and even if the writer themselves didn't take the drug and they're just using what somebody else explained, with the geometric patterns and the crazy visuals, is it at the end of the day, in my opinion, something like that is even more obvious in advertising and has a stronger association with the drug than just a voice actor who, in their personal time, in their personal life, that no one would have known about and realistically hasn't affected the guy's job or his ability to do his job. I don't think there should be any need for a company like Square Enix to make a person's personal life that much their own business, where they start doing something like this, where they start making the guy, Taki, Pierre, look like an absolute down and out shithole, like a real shitter. So many more people aware of, I say this guy's mistake. That's just up to anyone's interpretation whether that is a mistake. And the funny thing is, what is influencing these games, these films, whether it is actually drug use? For example, one of the ones that we would immediately pull to mind that we massively thought was a drug-fueled film, Alice in Wonderland. But even that, that you've got a caterpillar there smashing the hookah. You've got Alice taking mushrooms, which making her perspective of herself, big or small, or in this case, actually physically. I mean, look at this rabbit. I know a baked mofo when I see one. His eyes are glazed. He gone. But the funny thing about that is Alice in Wonderland was written by Charles Dodgson. And a lot of people rumoured that he must have got Alice in Wonderland from drug inspiration. But no, he's a celebrated mathematician from Oxford who obeyed celibacy because that's what the Oxford University demanded. And he himself thought that it was God's will that he remain celibate. So even what would seem like an obvious example of drugs being represented in children's movies, and again being used in Kingdom Hearts games, being used by Square Enix and other Japanese game developers, not necessarily. But then there are other games that would completely, or stories that would completely not give any kind of hint or clear sign that the person behind it was on drugs, and they massively could have been. So is it the message of the story, the message of the game or book or influence that's being used? Is it the potential message that it's given? Smoke something and feel happy. Is that the bad message? Or are you just going to sit up on a high throne and if the person's been busted and it's obvious and they've broken the laws, then it's that. And that's the thing, even with those laws, going to Japan. So I know why Square Enix have done this. You can get 5 years in jail for marijuana. You can get way more for heavy possession and even more for harder and higher drugs up the chain. But is that hardline approach something that we're all supposed to celebrate in the rest of the world? Is this something that, Square Enix pulling this guy, are we supposed to go, Well done, Square Enix. I'm glad to see you're still a morally strong and fibrous company when you're releasing something like 15 A New Empire, which is literally stealing money from people's pockets and giving them a lifetime of potential addiction struggles and financial problems, which is definitely happening. How can a company that is doing that to some people pull a high horse card on somebody who's just using a small amount of cocaine to tweak their consciousness? How did you get away with that, Square? And indeed, again, I know it's the country's laws and it should be respected. That's the way Japan is. But that doesn't necessarily mean I have to agree to it. And I've got to say, from the hardline approach that I saw in Japanese, that they take with their people and what they use and things that they get to enjoy recreationally, I don't agree with it at all. Japan has some of the highest levels of alcohol abuse, and that is infinitely more dangerous on people's bodies than any of the small amount of recreational use of drugs that could potentially get used out there. And in fact, that alcoholism addiction that is prevalent in Japan, that stems so much from this hardline approach that Japan take with its people. There's a book that I'm reading right now, the Tao Te Ching, which in my opinion is one of the most enlightened books ever written. I loved the approach that had on it, and it said that when you repress people and you vilify them, all they do is become wily and crafty. That's all they do. It doesn't resolve an issue. They will just replace an issue with another issue, or they'll just take the consequences. And in the case of Pierre Taki, that's getting sent down for potentially years in jail. And that's going to give absolutely no hope of reformation, especially now his career has been tanked, probably because of this entire scenario. So I think it's really shit, Square Enix. I think there was absolutely no need to pull the voice actor or to take it to this extent, or do what you did, which was obviously going to bring it so front and center to the media. And this is the thing. The guy Taki, he could have been using that cocaine use very minimalistically in a healthy way. I know some people can say you can't use it in a healthy way, but even if it had been another drug, let's say, like some of the things that are coming out of Silicon Valley, whether it's any of the nootropics, things like LSD, any other psychoactive drugs that half of them aren't even classified yet, that are giving people neurological connections, connecting the left side and the right side of the brain hemispheres, connecting them, and through doing so, affording completely different perspectives and inspirations, especially for creatives. Who again, do we even do this with like musicians? We find out a bloody rock band has been using. Do we suddenly pull all their albums or delay them or completely disassociate from them? I don't think so. And going back to Japan, with the alcoholism that I've seen, I can't endorse what Square Enix have done here, especially when I see how uncompassionate they are when it comes to this subject. They're not a country that I look at and go, yeah, they've got it down right. I might look at something like Sweden and Norway and any of those countries whose results on reformation and addictions are actually working, and most of the time it isn't through criminalizations and other hardline means of discipline. But the lack of compassion that I saw in Japan really surprised me. So when I went there, and this was something that very much stuck with me, is when you first go there, everyone is so respectful. Everyone is kind, and they do their role, and they put a lot of work into it. And no, they all still bow to each other. And I remember looking and go, I wish we had this in England still. Like this level of respect and airs and, I don't know, like sanctity almost. I won't go as strong as that. But it was only 3 days before that veil got completely lifted. And I saw actually where that was coming from. And it was from repression. The alcoholism again. But even things like when I'd see people walking along drunk. There was one woman who was crawling on her hands and knees in the middle of the road because she was so wasted, and everyone just walked past ignoring her. And when I remember when asking someone I met out in Japan, why are they doing that? Why not helping? They say that, in a public place, if something that is unbecoming is happening, disassociate, just walk past. And I thought, that's really shit. That woman possibly going to get hurt. She just needs a help up. And that got even worse when I saw an old man, and he must have been about 70 something, fall off of his bike, fell straight over, and I watched person after person walk past him. And again, it was because we don't want to embarrass them, we don't embarrass ourselves, And it's just unbecoming of a public place, so they just walk on past. And again, with a country even that has this view of its society and everyone's need and must to perform in it without complaint, and certainly without recreational drug use, it's created this paradigm that no one can have weakness, that no one can go through stages of their lives where they need to rely on a crux, or they just need a helping hand, or they're not coping, they're not keeping up. And again, this ties into the work hours that we have in Japan, the huge levels of depression that are happening over there. So absolutely, Square Enix are endorsing what I consider to be an unhealthy and unfair and ineffective level of criminalization. And the fact that they've done this and it's become so public, it's on the news, and even Sega's made statement, whatever they think that they should have received in terms of moral points, I absolutely don't concede a single one, and I actually feel like it's the opposite. And you know, his cocaine use in the case of Pierre, it could have been destructive, but it could also have been highly constructive. There are so many stories that I have heard and seen, and even people I know myself who have used certain mind-altering substances to change their lives, nothing but for the better. People have cured depression. I mean, so many studies on specifically LSD are coming out now that people are using it, again, to cure depression. Once again, I'm not saying to use it or do it. A lot of those were in controlled environments, and that's always a very important thing with professionals who can help. Even myself, I'm going to say I plan to go to Rhythmy in Costa Rica this year, where I'm going to be taking a plant medicine with shamans and doctors. Not for a high, this isn't for a party high. I want to be very clear, I'm not there just to get woo. This is for a deep personal journey, and this has been shown to help it. This plant medicine that I'll be taking, and no, it's fully licensed over there. And that's the thing, even just with the criminalization, especially, I'm sure you guys will know who come from the States. Isn't it crazy how you can get locked up in a jail cell for using something where if you'd have just crossed over a border state line, half an hour down the road, it would have been completely legal. In fact, you would have been able to buy it in a public forum and used it. And I can almost guarantee, and I won't say any names or anything specifically, but I even bet when certain Square Enix staff members have come over from Japan and they've come to certain events in the USA, and I know the state they're in is fully legalized and taxed and regulated for certain substances, I've seen them on camera. I know a blazed mofo when I see one, and you can just guarantee that there's some use of it, and especially amongst creative circles and some of the pressures. Like for Square Enix, especially in Japan, to expect so much of their people and not have any expectation for them to fall back on a crux of some sort, if you can call it that. Rubbish. Utter bullshit. And I think what Sega and Square Enix have done in vilifying this guy absolutely should not be praised or respected or seen that they've done something, morally strong, like they've passed a decent judgment. I don't think it's their position. I don't think that anyone should be getting involved in the personal lives of these creatives who are involved in these projects, because that tunnel is deep and long. And yeah, well, sure, you might say, okay, well, those might have been done in a time, or they're just rumours that they weren't actually charged. It didn't actually get done with breaking a law. But that doesn't change the moral position on this, or how deeply flawed it is, or how, in my opinion, it's just purporting naivety with this kind of stuff. And it's not coming from a place of compassion or even logic. Most of these are just archaic, Neanderthalic viewpoints from people who absolutely have no idea about the stuff they are condemning, or indeed the best way to approach it, the healthy way to approach it, the reason why people do it. If you're going to sit and ignore most of the mental problems that you have in your country, then don't expect a clap or a pat on the back when a story comes out that you vilified a dude who used something, again, to cope with or enhance his mental condition. Because that's a thing you certainly don't give a shit about in Japan, and all you've cared about with this guy is preening your own feathers and caring only about how it looks like on you. And in doing so, I actually think it's backfired, at least for most free-thinking liberal. I was going to say liberal, but I know that could be a buzzword in the States now. Free-minded thinking, people who think that altering your own consciousness and how you decide to evolve it, grow it, and what you put into it if it's not harming anyone else, it's not giving you these crazy manic tendencies or schizophrenia, like half of these mouthpiece politicians will instantly grab to say, oh look, there's a correlation, therefore it must be a cause. It's not. It never has been. And again, alcohol is infinitely worse for all of those things above, in terms of violence, in terms of physical maladies, and even just what it does to a society as a whole. I find that far more damaging. I mean, most of you guys get it. So unfortunately, Pierre, Taki, you have taken the brunt of it in place of thousands, if not millions of other creatives and creative influences on the exact same games and the exact same movies and the exact same stories, and likely even both these games to some element. There are people in the team who are bringing things front and center, and some of the greatest movies and films and creative breakthroughs we've had have come from drugs, and that is just a well-known fact. And that's not to say, again, you should go and just disobey a country's laws, and there should be some repercussions, but I don't think they should come in the form of this, and I don't think game devs should be playing judge, jury, and executioner for a person's life and career. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Until the next video. I don't even want to Kupo. I was going to, but it don't feel right. Just sign out. Thanks, guys.